Honeybees, the diligent pollinators vital to our ecosystem, play a crucial role in agriculture and the environment. However, their populations have been declining worldwide, and one of the significant contributors to this decline is the Varroa destructor mite. The Varroa destructor mite, scientifically known as Varroa destructor, is a tiny yet devastating arachnid that has become a significant threat to honeybee populations worldwide. This tiny parasite, measuring only about 1 to 2 millimeters in length, has managed to wreak havoc on bee colonies, causing devastating consequences for both beekeepers and ecosystems. I recently had a beekeeper, Frederick Dunn, join us on one of our beekeeping chats, and he was able to discuss with us a little bit about combating against Varroa mites, whether it be treatments and a lot of various techniques that help beekeepers combat against mites. I was wondering if you could share with us kind of what you like to do for treating them, what time of the year you like to treat them for, and what you would advise to a beginner beekeeper for treating mites.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've done a lot of things through the years. So my first 10 years of beekeeping, I didn't treat them with anything. So I was a natural beekeeper for 10 years. 30 or 40% of my colonies died out every winter. And I don't think I was even counting mites back then. We were just doing the kind of the good old Darwinian, if they live, they live, and if they died, they died. Well, I shifted over. I had some pretty good stock that were holding their own with Varroa mites pretty well, but then I decided I would try something soft. So when oxalic acid, which by the way, wasn't really approved in this country for a long time. So the year that oxalic acid was approved for application as a miticide, that's the year I started using it. And that particular winter, the first year, started treating, of course, midsummer when I had colonies that had high mite count. So in partnership with using the oxalic acid, I was also counting the mites. And we treated the ones that were loaded. We got 100% survival through the winter. And the overall productivity of the bees was improved. So I learned pretty fast that I kind of needed to do something with the colonies that had mites. Other people had done studies, of course, the domino effect of having a good colony that didn't have many mites in it. And then, of course, only treating the colony that did have a mite load resulted in a domino effect where there's a lot of bee drift going on that a lot of people don't realize is happening. So for me, I do have a backup plan, Formic Pro. So because that can treat, both of these can be done with your Honey Super Zon. The Formic Pro, of course, is much more invasive for the bees. You're going to have a bunch of dead bees laying out in front of your colony, which a lot of people are shocked by. But I've never had to use it because I've gotten the mites under control with multi-layered mite control. And by that, I mean integrated pest management, which is non-chemical. So if you have screen bottom boards, for example, with trays underneath that you can pull out, that's 15% of the mites passively are going to be lost through screen bottom boards. I don't have open bottom boards. In other words, not open to the ground. The mites fall through onto a tray, so we can pull the trays out and look at them. We mentioned float hives earlier. They have a really good tray system, and you can put anything you want in there to catch the mites when they fall through. The other thing is you wanted to know what time of year we would treat for mites. Well, anytime that you have high mites is a good time. But, of course, they're all building brood now, and when they build brood, they build mite numbers, but we tend not to get treatable numbers until we hit about July around here. So by treatable numbers, I'm talking about 2%, 1 or 2%. So if you did a 300 bee count and you had, 3 mites, that's 1%. So if we had 6 mites, then that's a colony to really pay attention to. I did an interview with another guy, Zach, of course, that did research on the very idea that we might be counting mites on the wrong bees. So I don't know if you saw that. But we know that the Varroa destructor mites go into the drone brood. But what I didn't realize is, and what his research proved out, is that when drones emerge and they're 2 to 3 days old, they're actually mite magnets. In other words, mites that are on the bodies of nurse bees will actually leave the bodies of the nurse bees and migrate onto the bodies of young drones. So that kind of is really interesting to me because it's another potential non-chemical way of kind of drawing mites out from your brood area, from your worker brood area, and sacrificing drones. And because it also came out at the same time that these new queen isolation cages came out, so there are a lot of moving parts here. These queen isolation cages were going to be used to have the queen confined to a brood frame. And of course, the rest of the colony would become broodless, which means now we have the mites in their dispersal phase, which means oxalic acid could then be used during the open brood period, and we get 96% roughly efficacy on the mites. But now, with the ability to draw mites to drones, and then now we have them captive in the drone frame with the queen out of there. Now the queen can continue to lay her eggs and continue worker brood production while we isolate just one frame of drones, because then now we've got something that people have been working on for a long time, which is how to, through pheromone, draw the Varroa Destructor mites to a trap or something. So now the traps are a living trap. Potentially, I haven't done it. This is something I'm doing this year. And but that's very promising because we would not be eliminating all of our drones. So we still have the genetics from that colony. But part of the study was that the drones have a propensity to migrate around to a bunch of different colonies. So we all know that very young drones, even 3 days old, they're not old enough to mate with queens yet, but they're old enough to move on to other colonies and then beg resources from the nurse bees in those colonies, which means they're now in close proximity with their mite loads to spread Varroa Destructor mites to other colonies potentially miles away. So there's a lot going on there. But my methods have always been, when the mite counts are high, create a brood break or take advantage of a natural brood break. So that can happen for us. It may not happen for you where you are because you're so warm. But right around the end of November, 1st of December, we're almost broodless. And that's a great opportunity to let them have it because the oxalic acid vaporization is not temperature critical as some treatments are. So it is very versatile. The other thing is you mentioned collecting swarms or making splits. So when you catch a swarm, we know that they don't have any brood yet. And they won't have brood for up to, for 9 days. So if you're hiving a swarm, you have an opportunity after they've settled and started brood production. We still have any mites that are with them can now be treated with oxalic acid in a single treatment. So it's not the series of treatments that a lot of people are doing. When they're broodless, we can do a single treatment and have a very effective hit on that. So anytime you've got a swarm where you've lost your brood production and there are no pupa under caps, you have an opportunity to really slam your mites. Now, if the colony has no mites, then okay. But it's interesting to learn how quickly they're moving on the bodies of bees from one colony to another. And up to 20%, some studies, and these are people that actually count bees, 20% of your colony could be visiting workers. So they're not even from that colony. So there's much more drift going on. So the closer your hives are together, the more treatment intervention you're probably going to need.